Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, Sow, Grow, Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of Sow, Grow, Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Are you a nonprofit professional who's feeling overwhelmed and burnt out? Well, welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast. I am your host, Haley Cooper. On this podcast, we will share stories of leadership, courage, and empathy that'll help you learn to take care of yourself, your staff, organization, and community. You will hear from nonprofit leaders who have been in your shoes and have learned best practices to raise more revenue and make a greater impact. Let's thrive together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. This is your host, Haley Cooper. And today I have Amy Varga on the podcast. She's someone that I've been following for a while. She always has so much wisdom, and we've done a few coaching calls, and I just am so grateful for her and that we get to make this conversation official. So a little bit about Amy. For over 25 years, she has worked with organizations to strengthen philanthropy, leadership, and boards. Amy found the Varga Group in 2013 as a management consulting firm specializing in capital campaigns, fundraising training, retreat facilitation, board development, and leadership coaching. The Varga Group has guided over 100 higher education institutions, independent schools, and nonprofits to raise more than $200 million. In addition to her credentials as a fundraising expert and leadership coach, Amy is dedicated to raising the standards of her profession. She's a beloved coach and mentor to numerous peers and is a sought-after panelist and guest speaker at conferences and on industry podcasts. Amy holds a master's degree from Santa Clara University and a bachelor's degree from Willamette University. And I'm so excited to talk about all things leadership, philanthropy, and fundraising because I know I could talk about it all day. So thank you, Amy, so much for being here.
Oh, thanks, Haley. I really appreciate you inviting me. And it's fun to see you in this role as a podcast host. And congratulations on your podcast and all your success.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, to get started, I would love to know a little bit more about how you got into fundraising and becoming a fundraising expert. What led you to start the Varga Group and what led you to what you're doing today?
You got it. Well, it wasn't an intentional path to become a fundraiser. Like a lot of folks, I fell into this work. And so when I graduated from undergrad, I knew that I wanted to make a difference. And at that time, it's been quite a long time ago now, but at the time I thought, how do you make a difference? So you can be a teacher, you could be a doctor, or you could work at a nonprofit. And so I decided I wanted to work at a nonprofit. Now I think there's lots of different ways you can make a difference. But in my 22-year-old brain, those were the options that I thought about. And so I decided I want to work at a nonprofit. I really didn't know what I wanted that to look like. And so once I started looking for jobs, I quickly learned that when you're working on the service delivery side, a lot of times you have to have special training or credentials, and I didn't have any of those at the time. And so I thought, okay, well, what are my other options? And so I kept reading about these development coordinators, and it looked like event planning and community relations. And that sounded really fun and like things I had done just as a volunteer in college. And so I started applying, and it was really humbling. I'd always been a really good student, good grades, follow the rules. And it took me over 100 applications to get my first job. And it was really humbling. I'd always been successful at everything I'd done and follow the rules and get a good grade or whatever. And so I got shot down a lot. And eventually I landed this job as the development coordinator for a small domestic violence agency. And it was a one woman shop at the time. So there was a development director, and then they were hiring a development coordinator, and that was me. And 2 weeks into the job, development director quit. So I really didn't even know what fundraising or development was. And then all of a sudden, my boss was gone, and the executive director decided to not fill that role. They were like, well, Amy's smart, we'll work together. So I really got thrown into the fire, and really it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I didn't know what I was doing, but I had to figure it out real quick. So that was how I got my start. And I immediately found the Association of Fundraising Professionals, AFP, and just started reading everything I could get, going to any workshops or trainings or networking pieces, and just, tried to find seasoned fundraisers. There wasn't the internet really at the time, so I couldn't Google anything. So I just started building a network of peers that did know what they were doing and just figured it out. And that led to me loving fundraising and discovering that it was really the best thing that ever happened to me, that I fell into that role and fell into having to figure it out on the fly. And eventually I went back to graduate school and decided I wanted to focus on fundraising and alumni relations in higher education. And so I did that, and then had that career path for several years. And then while I was working in higher ed in advancement, I decided that I wanted to experiment with teaching. Being in higher ed, you're around a lot of folks who teach things. And so I approached my local community college and said, hey, could I help, start a fundraising certificate class? I think that's something the community could benefit from. And so they said, okay. And again, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I just figured it out. And so I eventually helped launch 2 different community certificate programs in the Portland metro area. And that's really what the gateway was for me to the future where I am today. So once I started teaching, some of my students would say, hey, can you come and help our board with something? Or would you coach me? And so I just informally started doing really pro bono or really low cost consulting. And that's eventually I decided to take the leap and do that full time. And so that led to today. And I've been doing this full time now for 10 years.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And I think a lot of people who will listen to this podcast can relate. I know I can, where I fell into fundraising, and I have been in so many nonprofits where I'm the only fundraiser and winging it, trying to figure it out on the fly. And I think a lot of people get put into those situations. And I just love that you have earned your experience into helping coach others through it. So I would love to know a little bit more about how you coach people and unleash their inner fundraiser, so to speak. I know that's a term that you use for someone that is in a situation where they might be the only fundraiser or the only person employed or volunteered at the organization. I know fundraising can be a challenge for a lot of people. It can be daunting and uncomfortable. So can you explain a little bit more about how you coach people to really embrace that part of their job? And if it's their full-time job or if it's part of their job.
Yes, absolutely. So what I found over the years is that pretty much everyone who works at a nonprofit or a mission-focused organization has a high level of empathy and compassion, because that's what's drawing them to the work and to working in an organization that has a mission as its focus. But somehow they don't connect the fact that those skills that they have around empathy are the exact skills that makes for great fundraising. And so they think that fundraising is something completely foreign to them, something that they can't relate to. So many people have stereotypes of what great fundraisers are like. They're charismatic, they're really great salespeople, they're dynamic speakers, they're maybe pushy, they have some innate natural abilities that they don't have. And so what I really like to do is reframe what fundraising is. Because if you think that fundraising is about pitching or manipulating somebody or being really charismatic in some way, if you don't identify as a person like that or think of yourself like that, or you're not like that, then you're automatically going to think, well, fundraising is not for me. But if instead we think about fundraising in a different way, we think about fundraising not just as asking for money, but if we think about fundraising as caring about people, being interested in what people care about, helping people make a contribution that's meaningful to them. And if we think about listening as a core way that we do those things and facilitating people making an impact in the ways in which they want to make an impact, almost universally, people want to be a part of that and want to do fundraising if that's what it is.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. Yes, I love that so much. And I preach the same message. And I think that helps reframe what fundraising is, not only for people, the actual fundraiser, but I also think for boards, because board of directors always, they're like, fundraise. I know that I get approached by boards to fundraise, and half of them are like, I don't want to ask anyone for money. But it's not all about that. Like you said, there's a lot of relationship building and empathy and listening. And before we dive into getting the board involved in fundraising, I want to talk a little bit more about listening and why that's so important in fundraising. Could you expand on that a little bit? And because I know it's an important part of fundraising not to be talking all the time. I know after an ask, we're supposed to be quiet. Can you talk a little bit more about why that's such an important aspect of fundraising?
Absolutely. To me, it's the key ingredient to great fundraising. And so I think if there's one saying that I could encapsulate if I distill everything I've learned about fundraising and come to believe about fundraising in the 26 years I've been doing this, it'd be this: people don't give to you because of your mission. They give to you because of theirs. And so in order to understand what someone's mission is, what impact they're trying to make in the world, and how they can partner with your organization to make that happen, you have to know what their mission is. You have to listen to them. You have to take the time not to, try to cram down their throat what your mission is and why it matters and why they should give to it, but instead go at it from the other direction, listening to what do they care about and why do they care about those things. Most people are drawn to the causes that they give to because of a personal reason, a personal story, a personal connection, something that matters to them for some reason. And until we really take the time to understand what that is and to hear the story behind why they're giving or why they care about your cause, we're not going to be very effective. We're not going to build those high trust relationships, and we're not going to be able to help people make their most meaningful contribution. And whether that's to you or maybe not to you, sometimes the best fundraisers listen to people and then help direct them to another organization. Or maybe they listen to people, as an example, who say, I don't think that hunger is my jam. That's not my biggest mission, my biggest cause. It's education. But then when you hear that and you understand that, you can then maybe help expand their understanding. So maybe you can say, education's your thing. Did you know that kids can't learn if they're hungry? So maybe hunger is actually something you should care about because it actually helps you meet your goal of, making an impact in education, just as an example. And if you don't listen, then you wouldn't understand that and you might never get the chance to make that kind of connection for them, as an example.
That's so powerful. And I love that you explained listening is really about understanding their passions and also connecting them back to your mission or another organization. And I love that you talked, educating donors is part of what we do. And recently I was on a grant review committee, and a lot of people aren't exposed to the issues in our local community or just don't have a full capacity about it. And because I've worked in fundraising for the last 12 years, I have more of a well-rounded idea of homelessness and hunger and the impacts that these have on people's lives. I would love you to expand a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, on what are some ways or tools that we can educate our donors about the issues that our clients face or our mission sets out to solve. Because I think it's so important to both inspire and educate our donors on the issues so that they can really make a well-rounded decision on how to best invest. And so can you talk a little bit about strategies that we can use to educate our donors on the mission, on the problem our mission sets out to solve?
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely. But first, I'm big on evidence-based strategies and evidence data-driven fundraising. And so one of the things that I found really important to learn several years ago was that there's a difference between what inspires giving with first-time donors versus donors who are already established as giving to your organization. So this was a big aha for me. So when you're trying to acquire a new donor, get someone to give to you for the first time, you're needing to appeal to their heart. So that inspirational message, that story of one recipient or one family or a small unit impact, something very specific, tangible, and demonstrable of change that giving can have. That's the story told from an emotional, heart-based way that inspires people to make their first gift. On average, there's of course always an exception, but generally speaking, that's what inspires someone to make their first gift. Once they've made their first gift, however, that shifts. So once someone has skin in the game and they've made their gift, then their giving orientation shifts to what has been the impact of my giving. And that's a place where then I think that the educational piece is really critical. So while maybe in the beginning I wouldn't advocate for using education or facts or statistics or information to acquire donors. But once you have donors, then it's about stewarding them. And so one of the things that I think is really important to remember is that oftentimes when we think of stewarding or kind of maintaining those relationships, we often think about giving recognition, saying thank you. But what donors consistently say, and this is from the research that Penelope Burke and her team have done, is that they don't want recognition. Some do, and of course we should say thank you. But what donors really want is information. And so they want information about their giving. They want to know about the impact of their giving, and they want to be educated about the causes that they're giving to. And so that can look a lot of different ways. That can be on a one-to-one basis. You can send short messages about impact and educating people about your cause. One of my favorite ways for especially bigger or major donors or folks that you're really wanting to cultivate are having salons with your executive director. So having a monthly salon that focuses on a little bit of a deep dive, lunch and learn or something like that, but it could be at any time of day. That's really powerful because I think that strategy ticks off a lot of boxes. It gives you direct access to your executive director or the program director of the work and you're in a small group with other people who care about the cause, and you can set the table that learning is happening within the group and also from the experts in the room.
Thank you so much for framing that and what it takes to acquire a donor with the inspirational stories and then what donors, once they've given, actually want. I think that was super helpful and something that I've never really heard framed that way. And thank you for giving the tips on some ways to utilize both of those strategies on inspiration and education. And I know that for me, when I was a shop of one and a busy fundraiser, I think we all are, the more and more I talk to my peers that are fundraisers, they're like, I'm just so busy. And people hear this, oh, now I have to go do a salon, or now I have to go meet one-on-one with my donors, or they just think that they need to add all of these things to their plate. And it stresses people out, and it can obviously lead to burnout. There's a high turnover rate in fundraising, which we won't talk about that now, but I think one of the things that you coach on is like how, as a fundraiser, you can be strategic and be less stressful so that you can really utilize the strategies. And these are effective strategies I've seen in my own life that, like, when I'm actually using ones that engage the donors that I already have, it does create less stress because there is more ROI at the end of the day. So how can fundraisers use these tools and these strategies, and I like to say work smarter, not harder, and really create that dynamic of joy in their life and the work that they're doing?
Yeah. I think there's a couple things. There's some practical time management pieces, and then there's also really more of a heart-centered approach. So let's talk about both of those. So from a heart-centered place, I think that as fundraisers, one of the things that I think we can be at risk for is that we aren't in the work. We're not delivering the work of our organization. And so we have to figure out a way to stay connected to the work and the purpose of the work and the reason we personally care about the work. I've yet to meet a fundraiser that's fundraising for something that they don't personally care about. So you're drawn to doing it at the organization you're doing it at because of a reason that's personal to you. And so it's really important that we make time to stay connected to that purpose. And so whether that's volunteering in your organization during your work day, if it's making just casual conversation, if you're wanting to just take a break at some point from your work tasks of visiting with program staff and the people that are doing the service delivery, it's really important that we feed our own sense of purpose of why we're doing the work. And that can look so many different ways, obviously. But that's, I think, a heart-centered way that that's a bit of an antidote to that burnout and that kind of swirl and stress, is just remembering we're not just doing tasks. We're doing it for a greater purpose, to reach a greater end. And what is that? And how do we stay connected to why that matters? And also making sure that we hear about the wins that are happening in that work, because for a lot of the causes that we work with, they're entrenched, large, systematic level challenges. We're not going to solve homelessness in a week or in a year, or climate change in 2 months, or whatever it is that we're working on. And it can feel defeating sometimes to feel like, gosh, we're working on such a big cause. So we have to find, and for ourselves, remember to lean into the things that are happening, that are changing, that are making a difference, because that feeds us. It's just not just feeding our donors, that kind of thing, but we need that ourselves. And so that's, from a heart-centered perspective, I think really critical. From a time management perspective, there's a couple little hacks or tools that I love and have used myself and advocate with those that I coach. One is color coding your calendar. So most people use an online-based calendar. And so when you do that, any kind of appointment or task that you're doing that's directly around fundraising with your donors, I like to recommend that people make that green for money, whatever, right? Whatever color you want, but green is fun because it's easy. And then look at your calendar at a glance for the week or even the month and see how much green is on there. It's surprising when people do that that other kinds of meetings, other duties as assigned kinds of activities can truly take over your work. And when you really look at how much time am I actually spending in direct contact with my donors, it can be very little. And when we can color code like that, it is just a visual representation of that. And it can be very eye-opening, both for you to say, first of all, you can't fundraise from behind your desk, so to speak, right? You have to be in the green zone to be effective. And so if you don't have that much green, you're not actually doing the core function of your job. So that's a check for you, but it's also a tool to talk with your boss or your supervisor to say, look, this is the green. It's not that much. What can we do about that? So that's just a really practical way to check yourself about how much of my job am I doing that's really the core function or not. The other thing I like to do that's about time management is to use, and I use this religiously every day and have for years, is deciding the night before what your next day's highlight is. And so what that does is it helps you end your day in a way. There's a ritual aspect to that. Like the end of one day, you look ahead and say, what is the one thing that I need to accomplish tomorrow? Not 10 things, not 2 things, not whatever, but the one thing. Chances are you're going to do more than one thing the next day. But if you had to just pick what is your highest priority task for the next day, make sure you're clear about what that is so that you can achieve that, so that no matter what happens, because our best laid plans get changed every day. There's never been a day in any of our lives that went exactly like we thought it would go. That's life. That's not a failure of yours. That's just the way things work. So if we're really clear about what that one thing is, we can make sure that we get that done. And then anything else above that is bonus. And I think if you really stick to prioritizing green time or time with donors, and also really every day have a discipline of getting the one highest priority thing done, it is truly transformative.
Hey there, podcast family. If you're like me and deeply committed to improving your leadership skills and fostering better connections with your team, I've got something truly amazing to share with you. I'm proud to introduce the EMC Masterclass, something I talk about often as a certified trainer. It's an incredible program developed by the renowned Dr. Lola Gershfeld, an organizational psychologist and corporate emotional connection expert. You might remember her from a podcast episode where she shared invaluable insights into the world of emotional connection. Dr. Gershfeld's EMC Leaders courses are designed for anyone working with people, whether you're a manager, supervisor, team leader, educator, coach, mentor, or a team member. This program is truly for everyone looking to enhance their communication and collaboration skills to raise more revenue for their mission. Now, let me tell you why the EMC Masterclass is a game changer. Dr. Gershfeld's groundbreaking emotional connection process has been integrated into top universities' curriculum and recognized by international organizations like ICF, HRCI, and SHRM. Humans are wired to seek emotional safety, and when we feel safe, we're more likely to take risks, share innovative ideas, and collaborate effectively. The EMC process is the catalyst for creating that emotional safety within your team. The virtual EMC Masterclass consists of 8 modules with 4 hours of expertly recorded material, 13 quizzes to reinforce your learning, and a workbook filled with activities for offline practice and something I still refer to daily. Ready to become an emotional connection master? Dr. Gershfeld is offering an exclusive detail for our podcast listeners. Use the code LEADWITHHEART to enjoy a generous 10% discount on the EMC Masterclass. Head over to emcleaders.com and enroll in the EMC Masterclass today. Yes, I love this approach of both the heart-centered and logic side. And I know that's one of the things I miss about as a consultant is most of the jobs that I've worked at have been pretty grassroots, and I've been able to go down. I was working in a shelter at one point in a room, or my last job, I was able to go down on a Friday and go to our grocery distribution, and our program staff knew every single 350 people were going through this parking lot, and our program staff knew every single one. They knew their story, they knew their successes, their challenges, what they were going through, and it just really reignited that passion and was able to help me think of ideas on how to engage our donors in this process so that they could feel what I feel as well. The heartbreak of a family that is on the brink of losing their house, or the celebration of a family who just got into their first home, really experiencing those stories, and it reignites that passion and that fuel to do the work that you do. And I think, especially as a consultant, you have to there's that balance of being in the work, but also being like twice removed now. And I love this logic idea. And you shared wonderful ways earlier about how to get into that green zone, how to engage your donors and reasons to call them. And I know for me, my daily tasks I always view my big goal or my fundraising plan. And what's that goal? How many donors do I need to fundraise from or reach out to on a monthly, on a yearly, quarterly basis, and then break down that into my daily tasks of, okay, if I need to talk to 20 donors this month, this is how many I'm going to call within a day. And so I think that's super helpful to really keep it mission centered, but also on that goal that you're working towards. And I would love to transition to the heart centered approach of, I think a part of fundraising is also building a culture of philanthropy, or having that culture of philanthropy established. And it's not just the fundraiser's work, although it is our job description to raise money. It really is a cultural and organizational effort. And, I think board members are often once removed as well from the mission. They don't get to experience what the organization is doing. They just get to hear from the executive director or the fundraiser or the program director on what they're working on. So I would love to know how to build that purpose and that sense of purpose into a whole organizational, this is a broad question, but like a whole organization and at the board level. Like, how do you continue to reignite that sense of purpose and remind the board why they joined in the first place?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of pieces to this. I think that for boards, there can be a big disconnect between why someone joins a board and then what it's like to be a board member. So the reason people join boards is because they care about the cause and they care about the mission and they want more impact or that change in the world. That's generally speaking why someone joins a board. And there also can be a component of professional development for why people join a board. They want to grow their skills, they want to grow their reputation, they want to grow their leadership abilities, those kinds of things. So usually for people, it's those two components for what draws them to boards. So they care about the cause, they want to make a difference in that area, and they want to grow their leadership in some way. And so if that's why people are joining boards, then the reality of being a board member looks a lot like a monthly meeting or maybe every other month, looking at financial statements and doing really kind of perfunctory tasks of governing the organization. And it doesn't feel there's a disconnect between the doing of being a board member, which can feel very administrative in some ways, and why they got interested in being on a board. So what can happen is that people can be disillusioned. Well, this isn't that engaging. This is boring, or it's not really what I thought it would be. It's not really ticking off those boxes for me. So I think one of the big things that we can attend to is just acknowledging that reality is often the case, this disconnect between why people join and then what their experience of being a board member is. And so I think the biggest thing we can think about is, how do we create a culture on our board that helps people achieve those broader, bigger goals that they have? So how do we create space and time in our board meetings to hear about the successes, creating a storytelling culture on the board of the stories that are happening in the organization and the stories of impact that are happening. That both helps board members feel like what they're doing and what they're involved with really matters. And it also inspires them to say, I want to help make sure more of that happens. That's an organic way for them to be better ambassadors. And being an ambassador is a central part of being a fundraiser, talking about it. When people are excited about things, they naturally talk about it. If you think about like influencer culture, right? Like just generally speaking, that's what we're talking about. Organic influencers just are so excited about the thing that they just can't stop talking about it. Well, we want to create that kind of influencer culture in our boards, right? If they're just so jazzed and so inspired themselves about the work, they will naturally talk about it. We don't have to say, talk to 3 people between now and the next board meeting. Like they will actually just do it. They'll be like, I just heard this thing at my board meeting and I am blown away by that. So I think that's one of the first things is we've got to create that natural influencer kind of vibe on our boards by telling them stories, by inspiring, by taking them on having experiences. Like you said, could you have your board meeting shortened and have them come through the warehouse and hand out the boxes themselves? Well, then they're going to be talking about that. That's fundraising right there when they're talking about it. So that's, I think, one big chunk of how we can make sure that our board is inspired and engaged and naturally have that influencer or ambassador orientation in the community. I think the other thing that we want to zero in on is this core question of who's responsible for fundraising around here, the organization. So whenever I lead an exercise like this and I say, okay, board members, pretend this group of you is going to pretend you're the executive director. This group of you is going to pretend that you're the development team or development director. And then this group of you is going to be board members and pretend you're board members, right? And from each of those vantage points, if you were asked, who's responsible for fundraising at our organization, how would each of those perspectives answer? And here's how it 100% of the time goes. Board members say the executive director is ultimately responsible for fundraising outcomes. Executive directors say development director is 100% responsible for fundraising outcomes. And the development director says everybody should be responsible for fundraising outcomes. This is a team sport. And until everybody says the same thing, it's like the hot potato. Who's responsible for this? Well, if you don't think it's your responsibility, you're not going to do anything about it, right? You're going to say it's theirs. And ultimately, building a culture of philanthropy is having that lens like a development staff usually does, which is everybody's responsible for fundraising. But unpacking that is critical. What does that mean? What I think that means is not everyone is responsible for saying the words, would you consider a gift of X? I do think that that is clearly the purview of the development staff and sometimes the executive director. So what does it mean when we say board members should be responsible or all staff at an organization should be responsible? What it means is understanding that fundraising isn't just about asking. It's about engaging, educating, cultivating, thanking, and informing people about the impact of their gift. Those pieces of the puzzle of educating, thanking, cultivating, those are the places, and informing people about the gifts that they've made. That's where program staff, board members, and others can plug in. Fundraisers get the wonderful opportunity to do the actual asking. They do the other things too, but they're actually less effective at those other things. It's more effective for somebody on the front lines of the work to tell a donor the impact of their gift than the fundraiser themselves. It's more credible if somebody who's doing the work can say, this is what your dollars have done, than the fundraiser themselves. So that's how it becomes a team sport.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing those two dynamics. And I love this idea of the different ways that you can engage everyone. And I always say I get approached because we're all notorious for hearing that our boards don't fundraise. And I think you said an important point that it comes back to engaging them in the mission and that purpose of why they were involved in the first place, whether that's a mission moment at an event. It's not because they're lazy. It's because they forget why they're there, but they also don't have a clear direction of what they're supposed to be doing or helping to support fundraise the organization. So it's our job as a fundraiser, executive director, whoever it may be, to guide our board in the right direction. And I love this idea of helping everyone fundraise. It really breaks down those silos that we so often see in nonprofits because we're all working towards that same goal and it's all towards the mission. And there's obviously multiple ways that you can be involved in fundraising. Like you said, the program director can share impact. The board can thank donors, invite them to events and things like that.
I think that the core question, though, that every organization and board member and all staff at an organization have to grapple with around the culture of philanthropy is, why do we want donors at all?
Yeah.
Because here's the thing. I think if you ask many board members and many staff at nonprofits, if you could have a tree that's planted outside your office, you could pick off all the money you needed and it was just evergreen. It would just, how much ever you needed was there. And you could just go grab the money off of it. Would you rather have that tree or would you rather have your donors? As long as they say the tree, that organization will never win at fundraising. If all you think donors are there for is to be an ATM or a magic money tree, you are having the wrong orientation to what donors are all about, what the point of having donors is. It's not about their money. Mm-hmm. Their money is an expression of you building a community of people that care about your cause. You can't make the change you want to make in the world yourself. The organization isn't the hero here. This is a community focused task. It might even be an international focused task. As long as the organization thinks of itself as the center of the story, like we're making the change, then of course you don't need to bring anyone in. You just need their money so you could do the thing, right? Mm-hmm. But if really what we're about is saying we want as many people to care about this as possible, we need to create a huge wellspring of people that care about this and that are invested in this and that want to work together to make the change in the world, then that's when you're going to win at fundraising. And that's when you're going to say, how are all the ways people can engage in our work? How can we do this work together? How do we link arms and hands with others so that collectively we make this change? One of those ways is going to be people literally investing in your work, but it's much bigger than that. And it's a much different mindset for how the work or the impact gets done.
That is such an important perspective. And thank you so much for bringing that up and being able to create. It's all about how we talk about fundraising too, right? Like I've had bosses who have said, we're going to go get after this high net worth donor. And it just made me feel cringeworthy because I'm like, that is a person who maybe has a lot of wealth, but you don't go get after someone. Like, I think that's important as a organization to really set the tone on how you talk about fundraising, how you approach your donors, and talk about them behind the scenes. It's not just how you talk about them in person, but it really sets that tone of, like you said, like building those relationships and inviting people to invest and be a part of this collective impact. And I would love to know your perspective on, as a fundraiser, how can we, I know for my job and my experience has been managing up to the board, managing up to the executive director, course correcting or speaking up about those issues so that we are more mindful about how we set the tone to fundraise. And so how can a fundraiser manage up to their board and educate them on these important aspects of fundraising and why it's so important to invite those donors into the organization?
Yeah, I think there's two pieces. There's an exercise that anyone who's listening can recreate easily on their own that I love to do with staff teams around just this. How do we get our board to fundraise more? And so the exercise, or be more engaged in it. So here's the exercise. It's really this radical inquiry. So instead of saying, I wish my board isn't doing this and this and this, just taking a few minutes to brainstorm all the questions, just questions, not statements, all the questions that maybe are behind why that's not the case. Do they know they're supposed to fundraise? Have they been trained to fundraise? Do they know how to do it? Are we giving them the tools to do it? All these kinds of things. Because at the core of this, what happens when you do this exercise, you realize, whose fault is it really? I would say 99.999% of the time, it's on the organization that their board isn't more engaged. Either they didn't know they were supposed to, they weren't told when they were recruited that this was part of it. They're not clear about what it means. They're being too generic. We want you to fundraise more. Well, what does that mean? And how do I do it? And are you training me? Or what are my tools? I'm not comfortable. I don't know these people. How do I talk to these donors? So this is like a general principle, right? Until we understand what the underlying problem is, we can't solve it. So if your problem is your board doesn't even know they're supposed to be involved, then you have to solve that problem. If they know they're supposed to be involved, but they're not sure what to do, well, then solve that problem. If they're like, all right, I know I have to do this and I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't know how to do it, then get them some training and some tools and resources around that. So there's some of these things that are just, you got to unpack a little bit and take on and be accountable for why or why not your board is engaging in fundraising and in what ways. So that's one big piece, I would say. The other is you want to have board members have the experience that you want them to create with donors first. So if you aren't first as an organization properly cultivating, soliciting, and stewarding your own board members around their giving, how do you expect them to know what that looks and feels like to do with other people? And so most of the time, people fundraise from their board in the worst possible way. They just say, everybody should give every year. Here's a form, fill it out. Well, what would happen if you did that with your donors? Not a lot. That'd be off-putting. Well, guess what? Your board members, you shouldn't be treating any donor or any VIP or anyone really in that way. Certainly not your board members. So, but especially people that you want to then feel like fundraising is a meaningful activity and a meaningful experience. If you're not first letting them have that meaningful experience, how do you expect them to do that or want to do that with anyone else?
Wow, you have just provided so many good insights, and I knew that you would, and I literally need to go back and listen to it because you just provided so many ways to engage donors and engage your board, and ultimately that makes it less stressful for the fundraiser. There might be more work at the front end, but ultimately when we build this culture of philanthropy and the systems in place, things ultimately do what you want them to do, which is not part of the game. But I just have had so much learning from you during this and so much inspiration on things and perspectives that I had never thought of. So I would love to know, as we wrap up, like, where can people find you? Where can they find your resources, access to coaching, so that they can, take what we've talked about today and really implement it into their own work?
Yes, thank you. Well, first and foremost, you can go to my website, which is thevargagroup.com. I'm sure it'll be linked on the show notes. And on there, I have a whole section that's a blog that has lots of reflections and thinking like this, and also a resource section. And so those are all freely downloadable. You don't have to give me your email address and get on some crazy list, but if you want those, they're all there for you. I do have a newsletter that I do send out infrequently, but I think there's a lot of value to that. So you can sign up on my website to be included in that when that goes out. And then I would say a place that a lot of people like to engage with me is on LinkedIn. So you can look me up under Amy Varga, and I share. Sometimes people are surprised at what I share. So many things that I share on LinkedIn aren't directly fundraising tips and tricks, but they're all these kinds of leadership and personal development pieces around listening, time management, empathy, the way that we just are human beings with each other. And with ourselves, and how do we stay connected to ourselves so that we can connect better with others? And how is that essential to leadership? So I would say LinkedIn is a place, if you like this kind of thing and you want more, I serve that up regularly there. And then in terms of reaching me to work together, I do lots of coaching. I do a lot of consulting projects. So if you're in the market for capital campaigns or major gift development projects, those are big consulting projects, and information's on my website and a contact form there. But coaching, I often work with executive directors and emerging or seasoned fundraisers. And then the other thing that's fun is that I've been coaching consultants. So people that are in this space doing nonprofit consulting or fundraising consulting that also want to just grow their business and grow their skills as consultants. I've been doing that as well. And then, of course, I love working with boards. We talked a lot about that. So I work with boards on all sorts of retreats or trainings, and same with teams and in organizations. So just last week, I did a whole training on generous listening, and I did a training on reflection and how that is an important ingredient for a leadership team, including all those kinds of things in addition to helping train your board on how to fundraise or why they should or what it means to fundraise, those kinds of more tactical pieces.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. We are going to link to all of this in the show notes. I highly encourage whoever is listening to this to go follow her, go sign up for her newsletter, because it is a dose of inspiration and education and about all things fundraising and leadership and nonprofits. So thank you so much, Amy, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Haley.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.